My partner's Ian's keeping it real. What's happening, everyone? And welcome to Al Chile Boxing Talk. We got the Al Chile crew here. We got Nopal Boxeanos in the house with Run PMC. You can only find them here. And then we got Sonteo Media joining us again, and we're very happy to have him. Long live boxing. Sean Gringo Hicks was not able to join us, but he's chimed in on a couple things, and we're going to share his thoughts later on his rescore of Kovalev versus Ward. But that's towards the end. We have some weekend stuff to get to, so we're going to get right into it, man. This was a great, long weekend of boxing. I really enjoyed Saturday. I just want to touch base on what we saw and see what you guys have to say about it. So we'll start off with Conor Benn scoring a spectacular fourth-round KO over Chris Algieri in Liverpool, England. And on top of that, too, there's talk about him possibly facing the Con Brook winner, him being in league with Boots Ennis and Ortiz. So I want to know what you all think about this. So, Taylor, let's start with you, man. What do you think about this this particular fight?
I have a friend that's a big MMA fighter, MMA fan, and he is big on Conor Benn. And he knows that I'm big on Virgil, so he's always been telling me, "Hey, keep an eye out for this guy. Keep an eye out for this guy." So his last 2-3 fights, I've had. He's been on my radar, and I like what I see. And I'm just glad he didn't hit Algieri on the way down. Algieri was clearly out, and he had the opportunity to hit him with the third punch, and I'm glad he showed restraint. I know it's a passionate sport, and the adrenaline's flying, and it's very easy to, just let an extra one, sometimes two or even three punches fly. But I was glad to see that Algieri recovered, that he stood up on his own feet, and he was conscious, and I'm just excited to see where Conor Benn lies in this welterweight division.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was definitely impressed with how Conor Benn performed. I mean, it's sort of just par for the course at this point in his career that he's fighting sort of the older type of fighters that do have a name. So he does gain notoriety and does have those small incremental steps up. I would want to see him fight someone more noteworthy in his next few fights, just so we could just keep seeing the progression and see where he's at. Because I've been a fan of Chris Algieri for a long time, and just appreciate how he's like sort of the boxer's boxer. He always comes in shape. He takes care of the nutrition, trains really hard, strength conditioning's on point, and he's just an intelligent guy. And he just the way he approaches boxing, he approaches it in a very professional manner, but that doesn't mean that his body's just going to last forever and his punch resistance is going to last forever. And I think being at 140 and 147 for a man that's probably, I don't know how old he is, probably in his mid 30s, and he was probably weight draining a little more, but he knows he's a doctor of nutrition or has a master's degree in nutrition, so he would know how to get down to the weight, but doesn't mean that it was probably the best for him. He did it in the best manner he could, but it doesn't mean I bet that impacted his punch resistance. Team that with being relatively inactive since his being more of a title contender after he lost his title belt. But Chris Algieri, like nothing to put down for him. He had a great career. I can't imagine that he would come back maybe for a farewell fight, but I couldn't imagine him coming back after this. But Conor Benn, I think he looks really good, very explosive, major power. At this point, I still want to see more to see where he's actually at, but he could definitely be a player in his weight class. We just have to see where he goes from here.
I thought he did well. It was expected. I mean, he's a young dude coming up, and like Run said, he's very explosive. He's got some power. But as far as Algieri, I thought I liked his performance versus Provodnikov's, but as soon as I seen him fight Pacquiao, I thought he was a total joke. You know what I mean? And he's got knocked out basically his last fight, so it was expected, and it was a good fight. It was entertaining as long as it lasted. And
Dude, I know what you mean. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry,
also happy to see what comes about Conor Benn. Happy to see if he gets a big fight, maybe versus Broner. That would be a good fight. But again, I don't think that would be a true test either, probably because I don't think Broner's even a welterweight, so but it would still be a great fight,
Hey, man, I say bring it on, dude. Conor Benn impressed me. Like, I like how aggressive he is. That's the one thing I like about these young, up-and-coming welterweights. Conor Benn, Boots Ennis, Virgil Ortiz. Dude, these guys are all ready to bang, man. They all seem like they're going to be the dominant ones. They like to come forward. They're not scared to get hit. Man, I'll tell you what, if any three of those guys fought each other, I would probably pay like a pay-per-view for that fight over any type of Keith Thurman, Barrios fight. I'll tell you that for sure. And I think it's time for Conor Benn to get out there, dude. I mean, he's not that young. He's 25 years old, and he's talking like he's the bad dude on the block, and he is, in England. You know what I mean? You have to come to the United States. There's a lot of smoke here, but, I think that the welterweight division is slowly becoming available for these younger fighters to move up. Sean Porter retired. Manny Pacquiao retired. Like, these guys aren't that far away from possibly scoring a title fight, if you ask me. So, like, I'm curious to see what's going to happen, and on top of that, too, in the last 2 years, he's stepped up his level of competition. But before that, all Conor Benn fought were tomato cans, straight up. You can look. It's just like just nobodies, a bunch of nobodies. So I'll be very curious to see what he does in the future. And I'd like to give a shout out to the chat, which is back. I am so happy to see that the chat is working this time. Run PMC had a conspiracy that I turned off the chat last time, right? Because we were doing the Canelo versus Lara rescore, and he thought I was going to get triggered if I heard about 1-2 sniper shots being landed on Canelo in the chat. That would sidetrack me. And I just want to publicly declare that it's not true. That's all. But I'm glad everybody's here. Oh, we got JC in the house. We have Father of the Year. Thanks for joining us, man. And then we also got the originator of Al Chile. We got El Chido Boxeo in the house. He says, Saludos, Raza. We hope you're doing well, man. Thanks for joining us. All right, man. If we're all wrapped up with Conor Benn, let's get to the next one, y'all. In Carson, California, we had Nonito Donaire stopping a fellow Filipino from the island, Raymart Gaballo, also in the fourth round to defend his 118-pound bantamweight title. Great little fight, and I want to know your observations on this one. Run, what do you think about this fight, man?
Man, I honestly didn't know much about the Nonito Donaire's opponent going into this fight. Just being completely honest, but Donaire seems to have found the fountain of youth. Whatever he's doing, and needs to just keep doing. I think it's probably just more discipline in and out of the ring. His style, obviously, after he fought Rigondeaux, was knocked out by Walters, and then had trouble with Magdaleno, has definitely changed, where he's more disciplined, but he still seems to be hanging on to his power at the lower weight classes. So it definitely was impressive. It definitely was a statement fight for Donaire too, after sort of the debacle that happened with the Casimero fight falling through. And then it definitely puts him in contention, and really good contention. I think even more than Casimero, based on his performance, or really lack their performance against Rigondeaux, to get a rematch with Inoue. So I would love to see that fight. It would be nice to. I mean, I just hope it's on DAZN or something that I could see for free. But it would be awesome if they put it like in California or somewhere where I could potentially go out to the fight. But if it's in Japan, totally get it. But that would be an awesome fight, probably like first half of next year, to make that rematch between Nonito Donaire and Inoue. And Inoue's fighting today, I believe.
He fought this morning. Yeah,
he fought this morning. I missed it then.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't even have a chance to put it in the slides, but yeah, he fought this morning and he won. It was a total tune-up from what I understand.
Okay, yeah. So then that's perfect. Like, both of them got through their fights, which were sort of tune-ups for both of them at this point, and now that just sort of sets them up for first half of next year. That'd be nice.
All right, and Nopal, what'd you think about this fight, man? Did you have a chance to check it out?
Yeah, I actually I thought it was gonna last a little longer. I also didn't know anything about Gaballo. I know that he's from like the Visayas islands of Philippines, but this is a Filipino versus Filipino clash, and I think that they're onto something here by putting them versus each other. There's a good Filipino community in California, and I thought it was an okay fight. Donaire is up there in age, and he's still handling. I think he's beating everybody based on experience, and I'm hoping to see where he goes from here. I was disappointed that we didn't get that Casimero fight, because I thought it had pretty good build up. But if we don't eventually get it, I hope that he gets that rematch versus Inoue.
Dude, me too. You know, it was a real pleasure to see Nonito Donaire go out there and still do it. I felt like he deserved a better crowd in Carson. I understand he's a Bay Area dude, but man, I'll tell you what, dude. If I lived anywhere near Carson, I'd be going to a lot of these fights, dude. They're probably cheap to get into compared to like the mega fights. And this was a good one. You know, I enjoyed it. It was nice seeing Nonito use his skills. Also, it was really impressive to see him go on the front foot. Like, I understand that absolutely had to be the strategy. You got to push the young man forward. He's a power puncher. He's not really used to going backwards. And this guy's kind of a KO artist, you know, but he's never really fought anybody at Donaire's level, regardless of age. So I was really impressed to see how Donaire dispensed of this dude. And then also how he could just like turn on and off his kindness and then his ability to go into battle, to love the victory. And then, you know, all of a sudden to go and get on his knees next to Caballo and kind of give him a blessing and say, hey, man, it's all good. I accept you. Pretty impressive stuff all around. Like, and on top of that too, man, you know, I've been watching Donaire for such a long time. I actually ended up asking Calix and D-Style Boxing on Power Punchers on Monday. I wanted to know like what they thought about Donaire's overall resume. Because I'll tell you what, dude, like he's been around for such a long time. And I remember his Darchinian fights, but to be honest, dude, like I really wasn't paying attention to the lighter weights back in the day. So, but damn, he's been around for a long time. He's 39. So, you know, I wanted, you know, a professional's assessment. They all agree he absolutely has a Hall of Fame career, and I'm excited to see what he does next. And I'm not counting him out against Inoue. I'll tell you that.
I didn't catch the fight, but I saw the highlights. And Robert Garcia has always said Robert Garcia's worked 13 fights with him in roughly like 09 to like 2013. And Robert's always said if he's in in the lower weight classes, then you know he's in shape and he's focused. So I was impressed by the knockout. I thought he did really well in that Inoue fight, and I'm excited to see what's next for him. And you're right, Carson's in Los Angeles, and I've been out there for a few fights. And the coach that I helped train kids out here in San Diego, he made it out to the fights. So yeah, it's a nice little venue. Traffic isn't always the best in and out of Carson. But yeah, it's Cal State Dominguez Hills is actually the campus that little tennis stadium is at. But it's open, so it doesn't help you when it rains. But it's relatively nice.
Cal State Dominguez Hill. You know, this is a true story. Back in the day when I was applying to colleges, I applied there because they had like a 70% female to male ratio, and I couldn't believe it, you know. But I ended up going to San Jose State, you know. But at the time, I remember going like, God damn, it's a whole lot of females. I don't really know why. And keep in mind, this was like fucking like 15 years ago. So I don't know like what's going on now. You know, I don't know what the ratios are these days, you know, but I was going out there to try to get my MRS degree. You know what I mean? So let's get to, well, what we consider to be the main event of Saturday. Vasil Lomachenko made his return and dominated Richard Commey in a 12-round decision. And this was one hell of a fight, and I have a lot of observations, so I want to know what you guys think. Let's get into it. Nopal, did you have a chance to check out this fight, man, and what'd you think about it?
Yeah. I noticed that Commey, he's got some long arms, man. So, you know, the game plan there was to basically flood him out on the inside. And, you know, it reminds me of Pernell Whitaker, how he used to get in these awkward angles just to be able to hit people, you know, because he had the longer arms too, I guess, but he's just shorter. So I thought that, you know, that should have been probably, you know, that's the thing that Commey has to learn and do, you know, because he is kind of taller for that weight class. And, you know, I thought it was a good fight. I actually was, you know, really, I actually, to be honest, though, I thought Lomachenko was going to take him out early, you know, like 4 rounds or something. But, you know, it was nice to see Lomachenko get back in there. And, you know, I thought that his last fight was a lot better, you know, and I'm interested to see where the division goes, you know, from here. You know, I would like him. I personally would like him to try to get a fight with Haney, but I do know that fight's kind of impossible to make. But they are saying that they're trying to get him to be the mandatory for that Gambosa's fight. So I'm interested to see where that goes. And there was a lot of ups and downs in this fight. I personally thought that Lomachenko, I thought he was showboating, but I saw a lot of comments on Twitter saying that nah, he was being humble, and of course on ESPN everything he was doing they were basically sucking him off every little thing, man. And that makes it hard, for you to appreciate when every single thing that he does, they're basically giving him props, So I thought they were kind of overdoing it with all that, and like as I was telling you, Chicano, it makes it hard, because I had just come back from not liking the dude at all for that same reason, and then he finally lost, and I kind of felt like with that loss, now I could sympathize with him a little bit, so I was like becoming kind of like a Lomachenko fan, and and then now I'm back where I started, basically, just because of the amount of attention that they're giving the dude.
Bro, are you telling me that you're tired of hearing about the Ukrainian dance lessons, man?
I'm tired of all of that, man.
The downloading? I hear you, bro. Well, okay, what'd you think about the mercy he showed Comey?
Oh, man, I don't even want to hear that either. I don't even want to hear that either. Mercy? Come on, man. I thought it was showboating, to be honest. But like the defenders on Twitter are saying that it was mercy. So I don't know, man.
Dude, I agree with you, man. I thought it was a little over the top and unnecessary. Like, he's there to defeat his opponent. I probably wouldn't have thrown in the towel. Like, we've been talking a lot about like towels being thrown in this year. And I got to say, like, I thought that was slightly premature. And, you shouldn't implore the opposite corner to throw in the towel. And you shouldn't do it over seconds and giving the guy time to get back to his corner. I thought it was a little weird. I'm glad that the ref was telling them to pick it up a little bit here and there. So I thought that was a little bit bizarre. But, outside of that, we were speaking about Nonito Donaire going on the front foot like he needed to. And Richard Comey, it was interesting to me because, like, he absolutely had to go on the front foot. Like, he knew that he couldn't be backed up, but he didn't really have a choice but to kind of just be in that shell and then do everything he could to always be facing Lomachenko, because Lomachenko was literally boxing circles around him. I was very impressed with Lomachenko's footwork. I'll tell you that. Like, I never really bought into the whole matrix thing. Like, I appreciated his speed, his angles, his power, but I never really understood the whole matrix thing. But dude, the skill set that I saw, like, now I get it. Like, I thought he was very impressive. He was able to fight on the outside and mid-range. He was able to go on the inside and slip punches right on the inside. Anytime that Comey would try to get his stuff off, Lomachenko would just come and counter back in a more superior fashion. I think he had full control of the fight. And I think we might be seeing Lomachenko at his peak. I don't really know if he was, in fact, injured in his last fight. But like I've always said, I think a lot of fighters don't come in at 100%. So no excuses there. But I'll tell you what, like, this version of Loma to me is superior.
I had a long day on Saturday, so I caught the Conor Benn fight versus Chris Algieri, and I saw the Katie Taylor versus Sharapova. And by the time I took care of the kids, we took them to the zoo on the way back, I started watching the Loma fight. But I saw enough. I saw enough in the first 4 rounds that I knew Loma was back to his normal self. It didn't look like his shoulder was bothering him. He was throwing punches. He was pivoting to the sides like we normally see him, catching him at angles. Like Nopal said, it was the length of Comey's arms that were going to give him trouble, and they were for a while. But I saw that Loma was back to his normal self, and that was enough. After the 4th round, I just put my phone down and went to bed.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Loma. In the first round, I texted, I think it was in the group chat, that he looked very sharp and he looked really good in there. And I was thinking that in the first round, and he seemed to be, maybe it's because of the opponent, but as he was getting inside, but he was putting great body shots together. And I really liked he was doing this. It wasn't like a true pull counter. It wasn't like he was rolling and countering. He was sort of like in between those, and he was coming back with the left hand. I really liked what I saw there. I'm still interested to see how he looks when someone pushes him back and is actually effective offensively while pushing back, how he does, or if he's just going to try to circle out. But if someone could cut off the ring on him, but I don't know who's really going to do that outside of Teofimo Lopez at the current top of the the lightweights. I mean, we'll get into our like lightweight list in a bit, but um, I have one guy that possibly could do it, but he vastly lacks the experience. Um, and I don't know if he'd be able to implement it at this point. But Loma looks good. It looks like 135 is his class. I know they say that, oh, he could fight at 130, possibly 126 again. But to me, that just sounds like when they used to say Manny Pacquiao could fight at lightweight. But yeah, he didn't fight at lightweight for like any time in his career since the David Diaz fight. So I don't really believe that. If he does, why doesn't he just companion at all three and just go up and down those weight classes? But for me, looked really good. Interested to see what he does next, and it'll be interesting to see what route he wants to take, because since Devin Haney is as stated by ESPN, the regular WBC champ, he has mandatories, unlike Kambosos, who doesn't have mandatories as the franchise status champ, belt holder, whatever they want to classify it as. So it'll be interesting if he goes that route and then tries to make the Kambosos fight and make it for undisputed, or if he tries to go through one of the mandatories route for Kambosos, then comes back to Haney later. It'll be interesting to see who he thinks will potentially still have the belts when he's done. So I'm excited though.
Very nice. I'd like to give a shout out to El Capitan D-Style Boxing in the house. My brother, Pound for Pound, Boxing Real News. You guys need to check him out. He's got a great channel. That guy can cook, man. Remy, thank you so much for joining us, man. It's nice to see you all here. Dude, I totally agree with you about that back foot observation run, dude. I also think that, and we could get into it here in just a second, because we're going to be observing the lightweight landscape. But I was thinking to myself, like, I really don't think that anybody could really like cut off the ring on Lomachenko based on what I was seeing, because we really don't know how good Lomachenko can be on the back foot. I have a feeling he might be pretty decent, but we don't know that yet. And could any of these dudes push him? Well, we're going to get into that right now. We're going to take a look at the lightweight landscape. Here's what I want to do, gentlemen. I want you all to give me your top four in your own rankings. Like, we all understand and agree that Kambosos is the lightweight champion. He's the man until somebody says different. But I want you guys to give me your rankings based on who you think the best of the division is, because like these guys haven't really fought each other. So I wanted you to give me your top four, right, in rankings, right? And then I also want you to give me any dark horse of the division that you might have. So we'll get right into it. And Run PMC, we'll start with you, man. Like, what do you think, dude? Like, how do you see the lightweight landscape?
It's definitely hot, but I think it's outside of Loma. It's hot with guys that really, I guess, truly haven't proven themselves over a long period of time. Like they might have like Tio had a good few years, but he really has that one iconic victory over Loma. Loma has the longer career, but then if you look at Kambosos, he has the win over Tio. Haney has a win over of elder fighters, and same with Tank. And then Cruz has a win over like quasi contenders. So, but my list is this. So, I have Kambosos number 1, Haney number 2, Loma number 3, Tank number 4, and then Isaac Cruz number 5. And then that is based on who I think deserves, like if you were to put a ranking together, what I would rank them as. But if I were to talk about just like skill, I would have Loma 1, TO2, but I have a question mark next to him if he's going to 140. So Loma 1, TO2, Tank 3, Kambosos 4, Cruz 5 again. And then Ryan is not on there because he's not being active. But my lightweight dark horse is William Cepeda.
Ooh, I like that one. Very nice. Nopal, what do you think about this, man?
Well, to be honest, man, I think that Loma's number 1. I would put Tank actually in number 2. I would put Kambosos in number 3. I would actually, and then I would put. I actually have Pitbull. I think that he has the potential to dethrone anybody on that division. You know, but as far as skill, yeah. And then number 5, I got Haney.
Very nice, bro. And do you have a dark horse of the division?
No, actually, I don't.
Hey, that's all right, man. I think that the top talent is where they deserve to be, man. I think that the top 4 are there for a reason. And here's my rankings. And I realize that styles make fights, but this is also how I think that the fights would go. So if I have them ranked number 1, they beat everybody. Number 2 beats the rest on the way down. That's just how it happens to work for me based on how I see my list. I've got Lomachenko number 1. I think he beats everybody comfortably. I think even if Teofimo came back and made 135, I think it would be a mistake for him to try to make that weight. And I think that Lomachenko would beat Teofimo Lopez. 140 would be a different story. And then I have Tank Davis, number 2. I think that he's pretty impressive. A lot of people were hitting on his performance, but I think that he did win last weekend. And he's showed me that he's got boxing skills. And I do think that he maybe did suffer an injury that affected the overall outcome. I think a healthy Tank, a dedicated Tank, can do some real damage, especially towards who I have number 3 and 4. I have number 3, Kambosos. Like I'm impressed with the man, you know, and he pulled off the upset, but there's still a lot of old film on him. And I'm not saying that he can't improve, but I just have this feeling that his reign is going to be short-lived. That's just my gut feeling, and we'll see. I like everything that he has to say, and he impresses me, and I'm glad that he's open to fighting everybody. I also like how he's willing to talk to a bunch of outlets to get his name out there, and I'm very happy for him personally, but I don't necessarily think that he's going to be around as a number 1, as the champion at the lightweight division for a really long time, but that's just my opinion. Then I got Haney ranked number 4, and then call me crazy, man, but I have Ryan Garcia as my dark horse. If he could get his shit together, I'll tell you what, man, he's got a good height. He's got great speed. He's got good power punches, and we know that he could take a little bit of a beating and come back. So as long as his mental game is there, dude, it's possible. But then again, it's very well that none of this is going to happen, and he just might fizzle out. So that's why he's my quote unquote dark horse. So what'd you think, Santiago? What are your thoughts, man?
Well, I'm gonna cheat a little bit, and I'm gonna leave Kambosos out. I'm not gonna put him in my list, but just because he's got all the belts. But I think Tank and Loma can flip flop on 1-2. And then I have Teo 3, and I know he said he's going to 140, but until he does that, I'm gonna leave him on this list. I have Haney 4, and I agree with Run PMC. I have to leave Ryan out. And then the dark horse. The dark horse is a flip flop between Cepeda and Isaac Cruz. Both of them are making a lot of noise, but I leave Kambosos out just because he has all the belts. But there's a lot of questions about him too. I don't know how he met. I mean, he did what he did against Teo, but who knows how he does against all these other guys. So I have Tank and Loma flip flopping at 1-2. Either one can be 1 or 2 at any given time. Teo 3, Haney 4, and then Ryan out, and Cepeda and Cruz as dark horses.
Very nice. Does anybody have anything to add before we move on? All right, well, let's get to it, man. This is our next little subject here that we got. We're going to address the Canelo hate because you know what? Nothing's even really happened with Canelo this weekend. We're starting to get some people just talking, man. It's pretty surprising, you know, and I think it comes with the territory, but we're going to get into it and just kind of go around, see what we've found and present it to you and then address it. So here we go.
The YouTube boxing community 2021. Tension rises once again as the Mexicans maybe might have said something. Now, as the YTBC teeters upon the brink of turmoil, only the members of Al Chile, a crack team made up of the most consistent panelists in the history of the YTBC, stand a chance of uncovering the truth and saving this community from complete and utter disarray. But really, it's not all that serious. Regardless, this band of hotshots will embark on a mission to uncover the truth and bring it to you the only way they know how. Al Chile!
Man, I had to bust out that trailer just one more time before the year's up, man. I loved it. All right, and let's get into the quotes, and then we're going to address it, man. Here's what I got, a little compilation for y'all. Enjoy.
So I don't think it's a training wheel thing because it's the same thing Canelo does, right? Everybody has creative matchmaking. I'm going to get this guy. He's a name, but he's past his prime. Everybody's doing it.
If you feel that I'm selling Canelo short, I know some of you feel I always do, right? Chicano Prophet, I hear you. I read your comments. Against Bevo, tell us about it in the comment section of this video. Thanks for stopping by.
Because I think you think Zurdo Ramirez will give Canelo Alvarez some challenges.
Yeah, he would. And, like, for him to say that is just a travesty. Really, like, this is why I really think, like, the Mexican fight fans should really have something against Canelo if he's choosing not to fight against other Mexican fighters. Because that's unfortunate, and that's really, like, that's problematic for me, in my opinion. If I If I was a Mexican fight fan.
All right. Yep, Joe Lopez, you said it, man. Dwyer called me out, and I'll tell you what, dude, it was an honor. I've been listening to that guy since probably like a good, and I'm not exaggerating, like 14, 15 years. If y'all don't know Dwyer, y'all need to find out, man. Like, he's been around for a long time. He gets it wrong sometimes, but the fact that he referenced me, couldn't believe my ears. I feel like I've made it, and I've been busting his chops about being wrong about Canelo. So I just threw that in here. This isn't really directed towards him, but I did want to talk about what Andre Ward had to say, because he was talking about Tank having quote unquote training reels and saying that wasn't fair because you guys heard the quote, because everybody does that. Canelo's doing that, cherry picking the older fighters at the right time. I really don't know what point he was trying to make, but I want to address that. And then also, yes, Shoeshine, y'all made the cut, man. I had to do it. I asked Drew if I could show that little clip, and I think he'll be cool with it. So I wanted to show it because he says the Mexicans should be ashamed, and we need to be okay with Canelo fighting other Mexicans, and that's his take, man. So I want to know what you all think about these quotes, and we can get right into it. Nopal, what'd you think about these quotes, man? You have anything to say about any of this?
Yeah, I actually understand where a lot of these fans are coming from, because of course, as everybody else right here in the Al Chile lineup, we all lived through the Floyd Mayweather era. And you know what? I got to say, I mean, we all know that, although we are not racist or anything like that, boxing is kind of racial, where we tend to sympathize with people that look like us, or, the fighters that come from our backgrounds. And, the Floyd era, if that's one thing that taught me is, I always used to look at Floyd and, I used to always say, oh, how come we don't got a champion like that? That can, how come nobody puts gives our fighters attention, that type of stuff. It felt like we were in back of the line, so to speak. And, when you observe the Floyd fights, I mean, he was always fighting a Mexican. So, that was by design, so he could sell his pay-per-views. So, that era, like I said, it helped me see a lot of stuff. It's like I always felt like, how come we can't have a cash cow like that? And of course, we had the other guys like Oscar De La Hoya, who was a massive cash cow. And so I kind of got a feeling like, oh, those fans should be us. That was back then, when I was like a new boxing fan or whatever, like barely getting into the YouTube thing. And, that's basically where most of this hate is coming from, in my opinion, because, Canelo got people feeling like, well, how come their fighters can't sell pay-per-views like Canelo? But you know what? If you really look at it, it's like a lot of work goes into building a fighter. It doesn't happen overnight. And people complain about Tank's, the way they're bringing him up, but they're bringing him up the same way they do any cash cow. Somebody that potentially at the beginning they're losing money on his pay-per-views. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. They don't put that kind of work into fighters like Haney. They don't put that kind of work into other kind of fighters. So what I'm saying is any fighter could be built up like that, and and I like to call this basically kind of B-side syndrome is what it is. And, when I hear Andre Ward talking about this, I can see that he has a deep resentment for fighters like Canelo, basically, it all goes back basically to his pay-per-view. I mean, I don't think it sold very much. And that was a massive fight for us fight fans, but unfortunately, what it do? Like 100,000 pay-per-views only. And, it's that resentment, Juan Manuel Marquez kind of like, you can see a little bit of in him too, because he felt like he was held back. And, when it's hard for fighters like this to look at a fighter like Canelo and see that these guys can sell a bunch of pay-per-views, no problem. But they must also remember that a lot of work went into building these guys up,
Dude, great observations, Nopal. I don't know why I was hoping that you'd be slightly more angry. I was hoping you'd pop off. You know what I mean? But that's okay. That just shows how measured we are. You know what I mean? We're not a bunch of animals over here. So, Teo, what'd you think about these quotes, man? Do you have anything to say about any of this?
I was writing down some notes as Nopal was talking, and I think Canelo has people in his feelings because he's a private person. And when you're a private person and you don't put a lot of out there on social media, um, you force people to make assumptions. And sometimes when people make assumptions, if they don't have anything to connect with you, sometimes they make bad assumptions, and it's bad media, and it's hate. Um, I come from the era where we saw Chavez Jr. I was a teenager in the mid '90s. I saw Chavez. I lived through the Oscar De La Hoya, and now we're living through the Canelo era. But I do have something to say about Ward being in his feelings and Marquez being in his feelings. If a lot, it's if they're upset that Canelo's making X amount of dollars or Floyd made X amount of dollars, it. How do I say this? Um, Floyd made a lot of money, and he's said this publicly, but he took a lot of L's outside of the ring. Um, and if you were to put the option in front of me to live or make the paydays of certain fighters versus having the tranquility of Ward's lifestyle, where he has his wife and his kids, and he can not necessarily have to walk outside with bodyguards and stuff like that, I would choose Ward's. So I think that people are always shooting at something higher, and I think they shoot higher at the ones that made the most money in this business. But sometimes that's not, at least in my views and the balance that I try to have in my life. I don't always shoot for those. So I don't know why Ward does that. It's clear he feels certain ways. Marquez is the same way. Marquez come out here and make some statements that I can't make any sense of. But clearly Canelo has people feeling a certain way. I live like 15 minutes away from where he works out in Sorrento Valley here in San Diego. But that's a very private gym. Only a select few media are allowed in there, and even the ones that have get invited, sometimes they don't get invited back or ask to go again, and they don't. It's not as open as other gyms here in Southern California. So I think when Canelo, stays true to his character and keeps his circles small, it forces people to feel certain ways, and I think just people are public about it, and it comes out as hate. That's all I got to say about the subject.
Mm. And I'd like to give a quick shout out to some people in the chat. Team Batman Boxing has chimed in and he says, Canelo has accomplished more than any other active fighter. To critique him, then do what you think of every other guy in boxing who have all achieved literally less than half of what he has. Hey, man, that's a great point. I mean, we could compare Canelo's resume or what he was doing at a certain age with anybody, dude. And that's why I think it's interesting that Andre Ward was chiming in and comparing Tank to Canelo. Like, I really don't understand why people do that. Like, anytime you actually start speaking back to somebody who does, they realize that their argument falls apart and they just go away. Like, to try to bring up Tank and Canelo on any level is just laughable. Like, I mean, okay, so Isaac Cruz was what? Top 10, right? Barely at the bottom. Okay, so I mean, people get mad at the Yildirim fight. Excuse me, they get mad at the Rocky Fielding fight, but he was ranked top 10 according to BoxRec, according to ESPN, according to Boxing Scene, and people act like that was just a horrific thing that he did, and that was just one of his kind of tune-up, stay busy, easy belt type fights, and that's not even close to everything that he's done like in the last couple of years alone. And then Lil Goni 74, thanks for joining us, man. He says Canelo should do the same fight undefeated black fighters to avenge. Well, I'll tell you this, dude. That's the other thing I wanted to talk about in regards to what Drew Evo was saying. In my opinion, there's a lot of people who want Canelo to fight different people at this point. So, if you want him to fight, perhaps like you might be talking about Charlo or Andrade, I think those are good fights. I've heard other people talk about the Charlo fight as being the one that they want to see. That's personally the one that I want to see. But people are also calling for Canelo to fight Benavidez. People are also now, like Drew showed, calling for Canelo to fight Zuro Ramirez. So we all really can't agree on who Canelo should fight next, and he should be able to call the shots. You know what I mean? And so we even have Shoe Shine. Thanks for joining us again, man. Thanks for letting us use your clip. And he said, I personally want to see Canelo fight Munguia, Benavidez, Zurdo, but Canelo has earned his right to call the shots. And then I wanted to give a little shout out to D-Style here. Y'all know him. He says to make sure y'all tune in tonight for HCP Prime Time. episode number 85, man. Should be a really good one. I know you guys will all be there. And yeah, dude, I'll share my thoughts a little bit more. But first, I want to hear what Run has to say. Run, what do you think about all this, man?
I mean, Canelo's at the top of boxing, so I think it's expected that you do get certain criticism coming from all angles. So it's not necessarily unexpected for me, and I don't think I'm not saying it's not unwarranted, but I'm just not surprised to see it. So I mean, he gets a lot of praise for doing the good things he does, and then there's some people that might not feel exactly the same way as other boxing fans might. So I think that's just is what it is. When you're at the top, you're gonna, it's like the old saying, it's lonely at the top, right? So everyone's gonna be coming gunning for you, former fighters, current fighters, analysts, whoever they might be. And everyone's entitled to their opinion. For me, I mean, I would like to see Canelo fight like all the guys you just said. I don't necessarily understand what he's doing with the cruiserweight move. I don't agree with it, but I see what he's doing, so I guess I rationalize it. Like, I'd like to see him fight personally. I'd rather see him fight once the guys clear out at 75, once they get out of their fights, because Bivol's available now. But once Joe Smith and those guys fight, I'd like to see him fight there. But in the meantime, I think he can fight a lot of guys at 168. And I think if he fights Munguia and he tells him to come up to 168, I think he would do it. So just because, I mean, for these guys, I don't know if they truly have to fill out a weight class. Like if Munguia just moved to 160, but he's a big boy, he can come in 165, 164 and still be fine, and maybe just not cut as much weight in the like dehydration process. So, but I mean, like I said, it's lonely at the top. I'm not surprised to see it, and I think when you're at the top, you get that accolades, and sometimes you get unwarranted or warranted criticism as well.
Totally, man. It comes with the territory, being the
Yes.
face of boxing. And yeah, Andre Ward, you could tell he's a little bit bitter, man, and he just can't let it go. And Mad Dog H here says Canelo did better in 1 year at 168 than Ward did in his career, and that hurts him. Yeah, dude, I think Ward's a little bit jealous, and I understand why too, in a way. I think Andre Ward definitely has earned the respect that he gets, but I don't know, man. Like, you could tell Canelo's just on another level. Like, Ward just wasn't really appreciated the way maybe he should have been. Like, I liked Ward a lot. Like, I went to go see him fight twice. I think he's solid, and we're going to get into a rescore here in a little bit. And I have a lot of respect for him, but I could see like how he's bitter. He always tries to cut the legs from Canelo, and that's all right. Like you said, Run. It just comes with the territory, and everybody's also entitled to their opinion, man. So I want to.
I have one more thing too.
Go ahead.
About Ward saying about creative matchmaking, because I think everyone has creative matchmaking in their career. Like, I was a big Andre Ward fan. He was one of my favorite fighters just because I got to see basically almost all of his career, and I got to go to a few of his fights when they're at the Shark Tank in San Jose early in his career. But I think, like I said, everyone has creative matchmaking. Like, one thing that sort of irritated me, I think it was up until the Kovalev fights, they were big wins. It was probably his biggest win in his career was when he fought Chad Dawson. But the thing is that people forget is he fought Chad Dawson at 168, and Chad Dawson was at 175 for like almost 7 years by that point. So really having someone weight drain down from there it's a pretty big deal, I think. And then as you saw Chad Dawson, he said after the fights, like, was Ward hurting you? He's like, not necessarily hurting me, but I was just so dehydrated. And for people that know Chad Dawson's career, he worked with Axel Murillo, who was under the school of Mackie Shilstone, who also had trouble bringing Roy Jones back down to 175. So then the connection with, and then it's sort of, and I think Ward knew that too, because Ward, when he started his career, was under Square Ring with Roy Jones. That was his first promoter, and he looked at Roy Jones, he said openly, as a mentor. So he saw that Roy Jones had trouble, and then he's like, oh, he might have seen Axel Murillo being Chad Dawson's strength coach. It's like, oh, he might have trouble coming down, just like Roy had coming down after the Ruiz fight. So all of those things are possible. But I'd just like to say, like, not one boxer probably in history that is successful didn't have creative matchmaking at one point in their career.
100%, man. And Nando Yama says Canelo throwing knuckleballs to all those guys from 160 to 175, pausing their careers for a payday. Man, they don't do anything when he's around, and even when he leaves the division, they still don't do anything, man. We know this, dude. And like D-Style says, these guys all just want payday. They want payday. The Don is in the house. Thanks for joining us, man. So does anybody have any final thoughts on this whole fiasco? I mean, you know what? We'll be able to talk about this in the future, I'm sure. But if anybody has any final thoughts about this, please feel free to share them.
I just wanted to finish by saying that these guys, when they want to discredit Canelo, they use the worst angles up until this point, and Canelo has literally basically killed every narrative that has been brought to his doorstep. You know what I'm saying? And, including Ward. I mean, this is a disgraceful angle that he used to even mention Tank Davis and Canelo in the same sentence. Tank Davis, what everybody's saying, he's 27. By 27 years old, Canelo was already fighting Triple G. So, who would be comparable to Triple G in Tank Davis's case? That would be like him fighting Josh Taylor or somebody at welterweight. You know what I'm saying? One of the top welterweights, which we know that they won't let Tank Davis do. So, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't understand how an intelligent person like Ward could even use an angle so disgraceful, so stupid.
Dude, I got to co-sign that 100%. Like, when this type of hate reaches the levels of ESPN commentary, man, there's a real problem. And sometimes people can pop off and say something. And although one of the commentators there with Andre Ward did kind of say, hey, he went and fought the undefeated champions and went undisputed. That's all he can do, right? So they did kind of call Andre Ward out on it. But you're right. A lot of these people just feel that they could go around and say whatever they like, dude. And if you've been here, dude, you all know the history, man. Like, I've had to deal with just the craziest narratives, but I just feel like, everybody's entitled to say what they want to say, but you start losing credibility when you say crazy things. Like, I remember when Canelo just got finished fighting Jacobs, and there were still people saying like, well, Canelo, he doesn't fight black dudes. I'm like, well, like, based on what? Like, Jacobs is the next ranked dude to see. He's a champion at the division. Canelo's unifying with him. On top of that, like we've shown in these controversial rescores, he was taking care of fights that we wanted to see back in the day. He fought Trout, Mayweather, and Laura in the span of like a couple years. Like, there's nobody right now who's fought better black dudes than Canelo. Like, you can't give me a better top 5 than what Canelo has, period. Dude, I remember when Canelo went into litigation against Golden Boy, there were people out here saying, oh, he's so scared of Charlo that he's gone into litigation to hide from a fight, even though that didn't really make sense because Canelo could just price himself out. He could fight somebody else. On top of that, DAZN wanted him to actually fight MMA fighters, right? Or some kind of weird circus fight for good money. But they were still saying just the craziest things because they could just say it and not be held accountable. And then they think it might rile us up. But I mean, if you're listening to that, you're listening to like biased people. You know what I'm saying? Also, I remember too, this was like I forget which Uncensored, but I was on Uncensored with G Funky, and everybody was starting to say, oh, Canelo only fights old fighters. And this was coming from Jamal Charlo fans. And I systematically showed how everybody's ignoring how Charlo's fighting a bunch of people in their mid-30s, fought a 42-year-old for his first belt. And if you average out the age of the average opponent for Canelo is younger than the average age of the opponent for Charlo. And then after that, I didn't hear anything. So it's just bizarre to me, and now Charlo's still undefeated, but they really don't want Canelo to fight Charlo. And here's the other thing too that I'm tired of hearing. Like, people always go, well, I want him to fight this guy, but I'm not going to give you a prediction on it yet, or I'm not even saying that Canelo will lose to this dude. I just want to see it. Well, it's like, my thing is like, we've already shown earlier, like, nobody can really agree on who Canelo should fight next. So I think it would only be fair to hear from people who actually think that the person that they want to fight Canelo can actually beat Canelo. But I don't think I've heard that at all. Like, I have never heard anybody go, I want Canelo to fight this dude because this dude could beat Canelo. I think he will. It's just a bunch of like, well, this is what I want, and I'm just going to cry if I don't get it.
Yeah, you know what? It reminds me of that song Dance Monkey. You know what I'm saying? It's like, like they want Canelo to do all this crazy shit. They got a list of guys that he still has to fight to earn their, to get on their good graces. But we know what it is, bro. Soon as he fights and beats that guy, now he has to beat this guy because that fight wasn't enough. I miscalculated how good the other guy was. You know what I mean? When in actuality, they miscalculated how good Canelo is, to the point where I think it's just basically they don't like the guy. They don't want to give him credit, and that's it. Like I said, they always got a guy that he has to fight. Now it's Zurdo. Tomorrow it's going to be Beterbiev. For me, to be honest, I don't need to see any more fights from Canelo. If he wants to retire, he could retire. If he is going to fight an important fight, for me, the most important fight would be Beterbiev, before he gets even older, and that's it. That would be the cherry on top. The rest of the fights, he can just do he could take the Mayweather route now and just pick his opponents. Really? I think even the Benavidez fight would be entertaining. You know what I mean? The Charlo fight, I think it's going to be a total wash. I think Charlo would get knocked out in 3 rounds. I think it would even be better if Canelo fought young Jermel instead of older Charlo. I think Jermel deserves that fight even more. You know, the fights coming up, they're basically just big events. And, you know, I would like to see them all. But like I said, boxing legacy wise, the only fights that'll matter now is probably better with, you know, fights like that, because that's a very dangerous fight, you know. And in my opinion, that's probably one of the important ones. But, you know, for boxing fans' sake, I think they want to see the Charlo fight. They want to see the, you know, the Benavides fights like that. But I don't think those fights prove anything, because in my opinion, Canelo beats them guys easy.
Hey, man, you're right. And it's like you said, no ball, dude. I do think that Canelo would spark out Charlo, but I would just get a level of satisfaction out of it, you know. Plus, I do think it's kind of a big fight. Like, that's one of the bigger names. If you ask me, like outside of the Triple G trilogy, like I think that fight would be the biggest moneymaker, in my opinion. So I want to see it, man. And it's like Nano Yama says, what these haters do is just smooth diminishing. To quote Maestro the way he says it, man. I like that stuff. All right. And we got some people saying some things. Let me chime in here with Father of the Year, who says the same people that said Canelo was scared of Charlo now saying that Charlo is a cherry pick. LOL. Hey, that's a great point. Mad Dog H says Canelo becomes undisputed in 1 year and they mad at him. But Charlo, who goes life and death with Montiel, a number 4 ranked voluntary, and that's the only fight that he had in a whole entire calendar year. Figure that one out. And that was his only fight at the same time. And they say he's ducking him. That's what I'm saying. And the Don is in the house and he says that Canelo can do no wrong in my book. Hey, man. Well, there you go, dude. And Team Batman Boxing. Canelo lives for boxing. He's all about legacy and will continue to make history. All right. Does anybody have anything else to say now that we're a little bit more riled up and maybe the coffee's kicking in? Sante, are you going to rage or what? You got anything to say or should we move on, man?
No, we can move on.
All right. Let's move on then.
I have one thing. I have one thing to ask is because I might not be as plugged into the YTBC as others, but are people really saying at this point that Canelo is still ducking Jermall Charlo?
Not that I've heard. Like right now,
Okay.
they're kind of trying to have Canelo fight Benavides. I think they're scared. Like they've been talking about it, but now that it's a real possibility, they're a little scared. I mean, because they know what's going to happen too. Like I've never heard anybody actually say that Jermall Charlo would win. Like I said, I want to see that fight. That fight's overdue in my opinion, so I'd like to see it. So like I said, there's going to be a lot of ways that we can address this in the future. But right now, what we're going to do is get into our controversial rescore, man. And this was one hell of a fight to watch. And man, I didn't realize how high the stakes were until I went back to watch it. And I'll tell you, dude, I want to thank Sean Gringo Hicks for giving us a killer trailer. I don't know if y'all had a chance to check that one out. And to give us a little idea of what was going on at the time, we have Run PMC to break it down for us. Run, please take it away.
Alrighty, thank you. So, Sergey Kovalev, Andre Ward, number 1, took place November 19th, 2016. And this is from the brand new T-Mobile Arena at the time. This is the second boxing match that took place there. The first one was Canelo Khan in that May, but this was the first one since then. And then this was for Sergey Kovalev's WBA, IBF, and WBO 175 belts. And this is essentially for the number 1 spot at 175, because at this point, Adonis Stevenson still had the WBC 175 belt, but was with the PBC now. He wasn't solely with Yvon Michel. He was now with PBC as well. And they were sort of fighting. He was sort of fighting just run-of-the-mill guys, Thomas Williams Juniors of the world, that type of caliber of guys. So this essentially was for number 1, not undisputed, but who would be considered the lineal champ, since maybe not lineal, but let's just say number 1. Don't want to get in that conversation. And then also was pointed out it was actually in the first round or right before the first round, and Jim Lampley was giving his last words, that this was only the 3rd time since the 1980s when Ring Magazine started ranking pound for pound, having a pound for pound list. This was only the 3rd time that 2 top 10 pound for pound undefeated fighters met in a match. The other 2 took place in the 90s, and that was Julio Cesar Chavez versus Meldrick Taylor. And then another rescore that we did earlier in Al Chile was Oscar De La Hoya versus Tito Trinidad. So definitely very high stakes match here. The way I looked at it was, this is Ward's 4th fight since his almost 2-year layoff when he was having issues with rest in peace, but Goose and Tudor Promotions. So this was his 4th fight in around a 12 month time period. And this is sort of, I looked at his Ward stand. He had multiple operations on his shoulder. He had, I think he had an operation on his hand. And then really for Kovalev, I mean, for him, some could look at this as like sort of the end of his peak. When you not this fight, but like the next fight with Ward could be like towards the end of Kovalev's peak. So this was definitely them fighting. I think probably not really in their primes. Kovalev, I think, in their prime, but Ward sort of leaving his prime, but still had to change up his style once he kind of bulked up and went to 175. So definitely an almost prime Ward, I think, at this point. But he ended up retiring early. This was on HBO pay-per-view. 165. I know Nopal said it was around 100. It was around 165K pay-per-view buys. And then I was reading an article, and they said that might have been impacted by earlier in the month. It was Manny Pacquiao versus Jesse Vargas was on pay-per-view as well. But I don't know. I mean, Ward was never a big draw. Kovalev was a big draw on like free HBO, but not necessarily a big pay-per-view draw for people to dole out the money to watch him fight. But yeah, and then talking about the corners, like definitely great trainers. You have Virgil Hunter, as always, in the corner, along with the greatest cut man to ever live, Stitch Duran, in Andre Ward's corner as well. And then John David Jackson, awesome fighter, awesome trainer, in Sergey Kovalev's corner. And then legendary trainer, really, Don Turner. I think it was out of North or South Carolina, another great trainer from the past. But sort of background on John David and Sergey Kovalev. This was their last fight where John David was the sole head trainer for Sergey Kovalev, and a lot of tension was between them about anything that ranged from pay, racism, just him not respecting John David. And then in his next fight, I believe he hired another trainer, and John David was a second, and then he fired John David after the Ward 2. So that's just sort of some background that we have here. And then Nopal, how'd you have it scored for this one?
I thought this was a really easy fight to score. Before I go into my scorecard, I wanted to just go into a small little reference of what was kind of going on. Yeah, as you mentioned, there was some Kovalev was involved in some racial incidents. You know, I think they were he had been. It was a couple of racial things. I don't want to go into exactly what it was, but it was more than one. And some of it was concerning Jim Pascal, I think, and some other stuff. But all this sparked
Adonis Stevenson too.
Yeah. All this sparked like a lot of racial tensions within the boxing community, because you had guys on one side saying that he Kovalev was big time racist, and then on the other side you had the guy saying, "Hey, don't worry about it. You know that has nothing to do with the fight." That type of stuff, or like, "You guys are crybabies," that type of stuff. You know, the other guys. So it sparked a lot of racial tensions because there was no understanding on either side, and it was a pretty tense fight. And it was very important fight because Ward had his fans and Kovalev had his fans, and they were backing these guys up fully. And like you said, Adonis Stevenson was basically ducking the smoke and just holding that WBC belt hostage. And that had already sparked a lot of tension on the YouTube boxing side, and so it was a really tense fight. And the reason why I bring this up is because it was tense for me too. I was basically backing Ward, not only because he was a Northern California guy, but also was backing him because I hated the guys that used to root for Kovalev. So, when I watched this fight, I was a little biased myself. So having to rewatch it and rescore it now with unbiased eyes, I completely thought that I was going to have it for Kovalev, because that was basically the narrative going around, is that Kovalev got robbed. And let me say that, keep in mind that I'm kind of indifferent towards Ward now, because I'm, when with his job over there at ESPN or wherever he works, I've seen him be really biased when it comes to a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? And so at the same time, like basically my scorecard, I only had Kovalev winning rounds 1, 2, 5, and 10. and I thought that he won these rounds pretty clear. Of course, round 2 was a knockdown. He knocked down Ward, and so I scored this fight 113-114 for Ward, and I believe back then it was like when I watched it live, I didn't really think it was a robbery. But of course, I was heavily rooting for Ward, so I was happy even if it would have been a robbery, I would have been happy with that. But of course, as rescoring it, I see that it wasn't a robbery, in my opinion.
All right, very nice. Great opening, Nopal. Thanks very much. And Remy says that he had Kovalev winning 8-4, 7-5. Interesting, man. And let us know if you consider it to be a robbery in your mind. And then Brian, the boxing historian, 206. Y'all need to check out his channel. He says Ward won by 1 round. All right, man. Well, great stuff. Sonteo, let us know what you thought, man. You had a chance to take a look at the fight, and how'd you score it?
Like before I tell you what my scores were, I remember the lead up to this, and I remember all the characters that were involved, and I remember the press conferences were full of tension. I remember seeing their coaches up there. I remember some of the racial stuff that was getting put out there, but there were some major players on this. Virgil Hunter is a very well-known trainer and coach, and so is Ward's manager. Is it Jay Prince? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jay Prince were all involved, and they all had stuff to say during the press conferences. It was one of the most how do I say this? The lead up to this, I can't remember another fight being in anywhere near it. In terms of the buildup, in terms of, or maybe at this time I was just paying attention to boxing more than I was in the past. But to me, there was a huge buildup. There was definitely people on both sides, like Nopal says, that were not willing to budge. They were 100% rooting for their guy, whether it be Ward or Kovalev, and it was full of tension. I had it 6 rounds to 6 rounds. So I had Kovalev winning because of the knockdown. So my score ends up being 114-113. But I can't turn off my bias. I can't turn off that I already know who won the fight at the end of the day. I turn off the sound to try to take some of that bias away. And I remember when I did my score last week, I was taking a lot of notes. This time I took less notes. Why? Because I want to try to be as much as a judge in real life time. I try to pause it as least as I can. But what I realized is that the attention span to go through 36 minutes, that's intense, because the rounds that mattered the most were the 10th, 11th, and 12th in my eyes. And you might be a little bit fatigued, especially if you've already judged certain fights already earlier in the day. I remember when I scored last week, I took a break in the middle of it. After 6 or 7 rounds, I went and got something to eat. I went to the kitchen and came back, and I continued. This one, I try to do it all the way through. I'm trying to take some of the, I'm trying to be as fair as possible. And I don't think I can be fair on a rescore knowing already who won. Just the fact of who I put on the left side makes a big difference to me. There's a bunch of factors of bias that just naturally exist. But I had it, the rounds I gave Kovalev were 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I had it the same as Letterman going into like 6 rounds. We were identical, and then we kind of lost ourselves. So for Kovalev, I had 1, 2, 3, 4. There was a knockdown in the second, so that was a 10-8 round. And I gave Kovalev, after 1, 2, 3, 4, I gave him the 6th and the 11th. Now the 11th was tricky, because these rounds, sometimes there's a lot of holding, and sometimes if Bird needed to talk to one of the fighters, you lose sometimes up to 20 to 30 seconds of action time. So I gave Ward, the first round I gave Ward was the 5th. And then I gave him 7, 8, 9, 10, and I gave him the 12th. So when I do my math, if my math is correct, that's 114 for Kovalev, and that's 113 for Ward. like I remember I remember watching the fight, but I also remember the buildup, and I remember some of the characters that were involved. I remember the racial tension. I remember some of that stuff. Um, yeah, and that's what I got. 114, 113.
All right. Thank you very much, Sonteo. So 114, 113. And in your mind, you consider it a robbery, or was it close enough to could have gone either way?
No, because I have some other swing rounds. I didn't circle my swing rounds, but based that I was already judging things a little bit different than Letterman. I think Letterman was the unofficial scorecard. I clearly the 10th, 11th, and 12th were like big factors. So I gave the 11th to Kovalev, but that would have swung it the other way. That would have been 114, 113 for Ward had I not. And so the only one I classified as a swing was the 11th, but I'm sure the 10th and the 12th are very capable of being swings as well. I have in my notes that the biggest round for Ward was the 9th. He was doing some it's kind of like where the tide turned, and
Yeah, that's where he got his momentum.
that's where he got it. That's where he got his momentum. And I'm watching this without commentary. I'm watching it without commentary. I'm watching it with the sound off, so I'm not hearing the crowd. And I was surprised because I was like, wow, even though I'm watching it without noise, like Letterman and I were close all the way up into the 6th or something like that. But the 9th, I have a big circle around it, and I have a note that Kovalev is getting tired. And then I think 10, 11, or 12 are can easily be swings depending on what you like and what you the more you study them and you see them live, sometimes, and based on my on the rescore that I did last week, it's only a difference of one or two things, or one of two or maybe I just got to get better at it, and I got to give more credit to defense. But sometimes I think the difference with this one was Ward went to the body a lot more than Kovalev did. So I remember there being a couple instances where I was like, I gave a lot to Ward for that, like a lot of 7s and 8s. I remember there was a lot of 8s, and he was just going to the body. And I said, well, what do you like more? Do you like body shots, or do you like jabs from Kovalev? And to me, it's clear that I like body shots better. So I started giving those rounds to Ward. There's a lot of things going on. I think it's good that we do these things because you start paying attention to things that you didn't pay attention to before. So that's what I got. I got 114, 113 Kovalev. If I watch it again, who knows? I might have something different. We'll see.
Hey, man, I'm like that too. Thank you very much. Sonteo Media has it for Kovalev, but not a robbery. And right now, I'd like to read what Sean Gringo Hicks had to say. He wasn't able to join us due to a conflicting schedule, but he definitely watched this, and he had this to say. He had Kovalev winning 8-4. He said that Kovalev's power seemed to have really hurt Ward early and often throughout the fight. While Ward did have a strong comeback late after the knockdown, it wasn't enough, in my humble opinion. Thank you, Sean. And we're going to get some clarification on whether you think it was a robbery. Based on how Sean tends to talk about what he classifies as a robbery, 8-4 can be close enough to maybe go the other way, but there was a knockdown. So we're going to need some clarification from him on that one. Lots of great observations. Run, PMC, what'd you think about this fight, man?
Definitely a great fight, and definitely, like the cliche goes, tale of two fights. I think Ward's body work paid dividends later in the fight, and also the different variation he was putting on the jab, whether it was like jab in the body, up jab, just like a power jab. He was hitting Kovalev with the jab all night, and Kovalev definitely was using his size early. And I remember when I saw Ward got knocked down, I was sort of shocked, and I'm like, oh, it might be over now. But Ward showed heart of a champion and definitely came through in the end. I had it. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I had it a 7-5 for Andre Ward, so that'd be the same as the judges, 114, 113. And I had close rounds, but I don't think these are swing rounds for me. But I think they're close. But I stand by how I scored them. I had round 3, 4, and 6 as close rounds, and 2 of those went to Kovalev. 1 of them went to Andre Ward, but I stand by how I scored them. So 7-5 Andre Ward victory.
What rounds did you give Kovalev run?
Yeah, I gave him the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 6th, and the 10th. And it was sort of weird when I saw the 10th round because I thought Kovalev clearly won that round just because Andre Ward might have looked like he was appearing to win the round, but Kovalev was landing on him. But then all 3 judges gave that round to Ward, which I found odd because I'm like, I thought Kovalev clearly won that round. And what I found interesting was, so I gave Kovalev 1, 2, 3, 6, 10. I gave Ward 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12. So definitely back half of the fight brought it home for Ward. But what I found interesting is like right off the bat, Harold Letterman was saying, oh, Ward's just running, yet he's dirty and he's just grabbing the whole time. Whereas, I mean, there was a lot of inside fighting and Ward was working more on the inside, but I saw Kovalev also holding a lot. I saw Kovalev pushing down on Ward's head. I saw him doing other things like low blow. I think he had 1 or 2 low blow warnings throughout the fight. So I think it was just what it was. It was just a fight. So
it's you know what's interesting, Run, is like at the beginning when they would clinch, the ref would separate them really fast. But then towards like the middle, I think towards like round 3, when Ward kind of stepped on the gas a little bit, because that's after he came off the knockdown, you know. So I guess he was like, I better do something because this guy's gonna get me. Ward started getting on the inside and hitting Kovalev a lot, and on the clinches. And during that time, the referee stopped kind of like separating them. He was like telling them to punch out of the clinches.
Right.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, I noticed that too. And I think the main thing was because I think early in the fight, Kovalev was initiating the clinches, but he wasn't like actually trying to work. He was trying to sort of exert his weight and use that against Ward. So I think that might have been why Robert Byrd was doing that. Because Ward was really doing a lot of great, even though they're short shots, they might not have all been scoring blows, but he was definitely wearing Kovalev down. And I noticed that like the body work from the 5th to the 8th round really is what brought it home for Ward for the later round, to win the later rounds, because Kovalev was done in my opinion, in like the 8th and the 9th. And it's funny, in the second fight, he was actually stopped by Ward in the 8th. So it was right around that same time. And one thing I thought was interesting about the commentary, it was like a team. It was like 2 commentators versus 2 commentators. It was like Lampley and Letterman for Kovalev versus like Roy Jones and Max like going for Ward. So it was definitely interesting because you would have Letterman at times saying, well, I just don't like what I'm seeing from Ward, the style, so I give it to Kovalev. I'm like, that's not how you score rounds either. And then you have Lampley saying like he was like doing his little like where he was talking. He was just at some points he was like, well, look, Kovalev landed too. It's like, well, okay. And then he was just saying, well, the moments, if we calculate the moments per round, it's like it was just odd to me how they're doing. And then when the fight just ended, they're like, oh, and this is a Russian fighter in Las Vegas, and we all know that Andre Ward is America's hero. I'm like, is he really? I've never really thought of him like that. Like, I know he won a gold medal, but I've never thought of Andre Ward as being like looked at as the hero. So it was just some interesting things I caught on from the commentary.
Run PNC, can I mention something real quick?
Hey, let me chime in and give my scorecard, then we can get into it fully.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Well, sweet. Well, great observations, Run. And I want to give my scorecard. I had it 114 to 113 for Kovalev. I gave Kovalev the 1st, the 2nd, the 4th, the 6th, the 10th, and the 11th. And I got to say, Run, great observation on when we were talking about round 10. I thought that was interesting too. Like, I clearly had that as a Kovalev round. So I think that particular score for that particular round is a bit suspicious. But I think this fight was close. I think if you had Ward winning, I wouldn't argue with you at all. I think it was kind of a coin flip fight. Kovalev definitely had the momentum early, but I think that Ward definitely started to take over in the mid rounds and did good work towards the end. And even in every round that he lost, I think Ward made a very good account of himself, even when he got knocked down. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was how they were referencing how Kovalev was just so much bigger and so much more powerful. Like it's almost like he had like this. I mean, obviously he was in his prime. He was undefeated. He was a unified champion. This was his 9th defense of his WBO title. So, I mean, he was a bad dude at the time. And so to me, I understand the aura that he had. But one of the things I heard Ward say once during a commentary of another fight, and I thought he was just taking a cheap shot at Kovalev. He said, when I was tying up with Kovalev, I was surprised at how he wasn't as strong as I thought he would be. And if you watch that fight, you can tell, like, even though they're talking about how much bigger Kovalev is and how much stronger he is, like Ward is pretty physically strong on the inside. And he has that weird hybrid tying up / holding depending on, the angle and at what time he's deciding to change what he's doing. I forgot all about that. Like, I knew it was coming, but I forgot what it looked like, to be honest. I haven't watched a Ward fight in such a long time. So it was interesting to see him implement that. And I did see it start paying dividends later on. Like, when I first saw it, I thought, well, is this doing anything effective? But man, it really did pay off dividends. On top of that too, like, Ward was maybe only slightly dirty. Like, I saw him try to pick up Kovalev's leg at one point. I think it was like in the third round. I thought that was pretty funny to see. But I really appreciated the style clash. Also, I think this one was a little bit easier to score. So I have it 114, 113 for Kovalev, but definitely not a robbery. Could have gone either way. And so I think we can all safely classify this one as not a robbery. So thanks very much, guys. So now we can get into a little bit more, because I want to hear a little bit more of what you guys have to say about things, because I also have some things to add. So yeah, man, let's open it up. And Santiago, you had something to add, bro?
Yeah, I heard Run PMC say that he gave the 10th to Kovalev, and that the judges all gave it to Ward. And I have here in my notes that at the end of that round, Kovalev was bleeding from the nose. And I wonder if that played a factor. I wonder if human emotion and that the judges actually seeing blood on an opponent, on a fighter, and I have 6 seconds to go in my notes. So I wonder if that's the last image that you see, that no matter what the other guy did, or if it was just slightly off, that's the reason they gave Ward. Because if you didn't see it come from a punch, well, you're gonna assume it came from a punch. And if you see it that close to the end, you have no more time to decide. And it's just, you got to put your score down, and that's what it is.
No, I agree. I mean, as much as they say they don't judge damage, they don't judge certain things, it's almost impossible not to, unless you're a very seasoned judge. But then the thing is I feel like if you're a seasoned judge, then you probably have your own biases of what you like, so that might get canceled out from that. So unless they're both going the same way. So yeah, I totally agree that they don't judge damage. And it's like, are they possibly do judge damage? Because also, in like, when you see boxers, like, even like, if we talk about like the Comey fight against Loma, like, he was getting picked apart, but at times, just because like Comey's body type, he would get out of the way or get grazed on the glove, but it looked like, because his limbs are so long, that he was like flailing around at times, so it made it look a lot worse than it was. Like, even when Tim Bradley used to fight, he used to like get grazed by a punch, but because he was so athletic, he would like jump back, and it would look way worse than it sometimes it was, from like specifically in the Pacquiao fights. But totally agree that when you have those type of things in judging, sometimes it muddies the water.
Oh, definitely, dude. And the other thing that I wanted to ask y'all about was like this hybrid holding / inside fighting of Andre Ward. Like, what do you guys think about that, man? Like, I've never seen anybody implement it like that. I can't think of anybody who does it like Andre Ward. And it kind of make for some boring times, but I found myself kind of enjoying it. Like, it's definitely a skill that he's comfortable with, like, getting right to his opponent and settling things. Like, what do y'all think about that?
I mean, when I was growing up, I thought it was sort of boring, but I sort of gained a better appreciation of it in Ward's later fights, because it's like, the way I think about it, it's like he's just slowly breaking you down. It's like it's like if a offense in football is running like an option offense or like a wing T offense, they're just getting these little like 1 yard, 2 yard, 3 yard, 5 yard, 10 yard. But then Ward didn't really always do in his career, but when the opportunity presents itself, you could just bust it open. So I do, and it's definitely a unique style, and Ward definitely a beast on the inside. So it worked for him. It might not be the most entertaining, but also for me, sometimes when you have boxers that are just flailing around with no real, I mean, they all have skill, but they're more of just sluggers. Sometimes that isn't really entertaining either, to me. Sometimes, for the most part, it is, but sometimes it isn't. But I think Andre Ward could be entertaining, or could have been entertaining more in some fights, because his last fight against Kovalev was definitely entertaining. It was just seesaw battle for the most part. I think Ward was doing better than, I think he was doing, probably, he looked like he was doing better to me, but in the second fight early, but they seem to be giving Kovalev tons of credit, but then he ended up stopping Kovalev. But it's definitely a unique style, and I grew to like it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think it's genius. I think the more I study boxing, I think they're using that clinch to break the momentum in the fight. And the Garcias always say that there's 5 qualities to a good fighter, and sometimes power isn't one of them. So you might be a really athletic and disciplined fighter, and power is not one of your best qualities. So you're going to have to find a way to deal with other opponents that are stronger than you. And you're feeling their power, then the clinch is sometimes something that you can do in order to break up the momentum in the fight.
Yeah, I think that it's a thing that a lot of Mexican fighters are gonna have to eventually learn to do and perfect, because how do you beat a style like that? We've seen Pernell Whitaker do that. We've seen Tyson Fury do those kind of tactics. We've seen how successful Andre Ward was with it. But what do you do when you're faced with the style, and you don't know how to fight that way? I mean, the other guy's gonna find a way to win, even if it's not clean. And the fans might get mad about it and stuff like that. But the important part about that is that the other guy's gonna end up winning, and that's the result is what's gonna matter. But I believe that the Mexican fighters are gonna sooner or later they're gonna have to learn to learn this skill. It's one that I don't see them do. They hate to clinch. Most of the ones that I see, they hate to clinch, and that when they're getting clinched, I mean they're at the referee's mercy to basically break that up.
All right. And Brian, the boxing historian, says B-Hop used to do it all the time. I got to go back and check that. It's crossed my mind to have a Bernard Hopkins Calzaghe rescore, but it's not really listed as controversial. But a lot of people think B-Hop won that fight. But we'd love to get the Al Chile's crew's take on that particular one. And then we also got Puro Sur Central Boxeo in the house. Puerto Rican Rum is in the house. Hey, Remy, dude, I saw your comment about how you made some highlights for this fight amongst others. Dude, please drop your link so we can all check it out. And yeah, dude, Ron, you made a good point, dude. The good news is that Ward did run it back. I mean, and that was the right thing to do. And he pretty much settled things between them, and also run great observation on how that was probably like, maybe the tail end of his peak before, although I've always respected Kovalev, even after, when he fought Canelo, I went to that fight as well. So, I've seen Kovalev live, and I saw that fight partly because Kovalev was the opponent. He was a legitimate defending champion who I respected, who's definitely going to the Hall of Fame. Andre Ward is also the man. So, this was such a great fight. Maybe especially in hindsight, looking back now, maybe a little underappreciated compared to what we get these days. Another observation that I thought was interesting is how much they respect the fact that Andre Ward is the smaller guy coming up in weight to fight this, full-fledged, strong, 175 pounder. But Ward had already been at, if I'm understanding what they said correctly, he'd already been at the weight for 2 fights, but they were still making it seem like he needed to get adjusted to it. So when a person goes up and moves up in weight and takes on a high level opponent, it's not this easy thing to do. There used to be a lot more respect for it.
Something that Nopal said reminded me of him saying Mexicans need to learn how to deal with the clinch. It was not any more evident than in the Jose Ramirez fight. And it even cost him a knockdown when Josh Taylor clinched him, and he was just like, I'm going to use Nopal's words, he's at the mercy of the referee. There's miscommunication. Jose Ramirez thinks that the ref has broken them up. There is technically no splitting of the two fighters. Josh Taylor hits Jose Ramirez with the 2-piece, and Jose Ramirez falls like a tower of, and hits the canvas. And if I remember correctly, the scorecards on that fight were only the knockdowns. So now we're talking about fighters learning how to deal with this, and it costing them. And if they don't learn how to deal with this, costing them undisputed, titles, because that's what was at stake at that fight. And I've seen that Remy has been writing that in the comments. And then there was another comment by Steve in the UK where he said Josh Taylor does that very well as well.
Great point. And another fight that I'd like to point out is the Valdez versus Consocao. Valdez would act absolutely helpless when Consocao would tie up, and he would just wait for the ref to go in there and break it up. And it's like, well, you've been working all this time to get to the inside, and then all Consocao has to do is tie you up, and then you just wait for the break. I thought that was part exhaustion on Valdez's part. But man, you're right. He needs to learn how to work on the inside. Teofimo Lopez isn't Mexican, but he also has trouble as a Latino just working on the inside as well. And that's a flaw of his that I've noticed, and we've been pointing out here on HCP. I hope he improves it. Does anybody have anything else to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add that, I'm glad that you guys gave your input on this one, because it's a very important thing for the fighters to learn to do, especially when you're going up against a guy that does that as his calling card. You know what I mean? I mean, there was classically there's fighters that use this kind of stuff to be at the top, or to beat other guys that were actually better than them, but they had the skill set right here alone that can help you win a fight versus a guy that's more talented than you. But you know how to do this shit on the inside, and and like I said, I just want to repeat it again. Not every fighter has the luxury of being the A side or anything, where the referee's just going to be in tune to, protecting you for these kind of tactics. You know.
Oh, most definitely. Go ahead, Ren.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, I totally agree, because it's like, when you hear, like, when they talk about hurricanes, how, like, the eye of the storm is the calmest place, right? And it's like sort of like when you're on the inside and you're fighting, like, if you know what you're doing, you can handle yourself, and that might be safer than you being mid range on some guys, especially like Kovalev, because he has long arms and you don't want to be at the end of his punches. But if you don't know what you're doing, you could be totally screwed on the inside, because you're just going to get touched up and you're just right in front of your opponent. And you do see that in some fights, definitely, like, where guys think inside work is just getting on the inside and just throwing punches, and they don't really even have defense. And I think what a lot of the guys lose is, like, two boxers that I saw that did it really well. Maybe not, like, I guess, like, moving around on the inside or hitting off breaks or things, would be Floyd Mayweather at times. I think he did that really well. Sort of the latter part of his career was fighting inside and moving guys' hands around and getting off punches, whether to the body or like little stuff to the head. And then Julio Cesar Chavez, very good inside work. But what I was saying, for both those guys, what I saw was that they always have good vision. Like, you always see them, they have their eyes open and their vision is just impeccable on the inside, which definitely helps, because some guys you see throwing punches and it looks borderline like some of their eyes are closed. It's sort of bizarre to me. But those are the two guys when I think of, like, and Ward, where you could constantly see, even if you see, like, pictures from their fights, they're, even if they're coming in, like Ward does that little, like, thing where he goes low and comes in with both his gloves up, their eyes are wide open, they know where they're at.
Great stuff. Does anybody have anything else before we wrap this one up? All right. Well, we have it. It was not a robbery. Andre Ward with a good win against Kovalev. And hey, dude, I'll tell you this, dude. I was watching that fight and I just couldn't help but think about how Canelo would look against Andre Ward at that weight. And I just want to give you all a little bit of a fantasy fight to see if Canelo knows how to handle that kind of thing. No, Paul. So let me know what you think, bro. Like, what do you think about this fight off the top of your head? And we'll go around.
Man, it would be a great fight. It would have been a great fight. You'd have to get both fighters in their peak, but I think Canelo's like that's probably his specialty, is fighting on the inside. But a lot of fighters are most fighters I believe that he's fought, they're scared to fight him on the inside. But versus Ward, it'd be a different story. It would probably be a good bloodbath, basically, in my opinion. And it would be interesting to see how good Ward would do with those clinches and all that.
So, Teo, what do you think, brother?
I think it'd be a great fight, and I don't think we missed it by much. It was only a few years ago that Andre Ward asked, they were at a fight, he asked Kelly Pavlik how much it would take to bring Kelly Pavlik out of retirement. And I think Ward said something like 10 million. He threw a number out there, and Kelly Pavlik kind of didn't answer, but kind of let him know with his eyes what the answer was, what his answer was. So I don't think we missed it by much. I mean, we're talking about a fight that happened in 2016, and I think it'd be an interesting matchup. It'd be a great fight.
Interesting. And Run, how do you see that fight? Off the top of your head, I know we haven't had a chance to do a full breakdown, but like I said, man, I was watching that fight and I started asking myself how Canelo would deal with this stuff and who would win. So what do you think about this?
I think it'd be a good fight. Are you talking about Ward, like 175 in this fight, Ward versus Canelo versus when he went up fought Fielding, or when he went up and fought Kovalev? That's the one we're talking about.
Any peak Canelo you want, and the prime Ward that we just saw.
Okay, I would say it's a tough one. I think I'd lean towards Ward, but it would be a 168 Ward, like Froch Ward. And I think I think that'd be a good fight, though. Like Canelo Plant Ward or Canelo Plant, like Canelo's version versus Plant versus Andre Ward's like version versus Froch. I think that'd be a good one though. But I'd lean, without analyzing it all, just like gut reaction, I'd lean towards Ward decision.
Yeah, I have to go back and watch that Froch fight. Like, I kind of have a taste for watching a little bit more of Andre Ward. Like, I watched all his fights back in the day, even before like the Super Six. But like, man, it's like I kind of enjoyed his style, and I kind of want to remember what he was like. But watching this particular fight again and just kind of analyzing it as I was watching it, like I do think that it would be a tough fight on both ends. Like, I definitely think it would either go to decision or Canelo by knockout. I'm also curious as to how Ward would deal with tying up Canelo, because Canelo is so much smaller, so it's almost like he'd have to like be like bear hug Canelo. On top of that too, it might leave his body open. On top of that too, if you watch Canelo's fights, like he allows you to clinch him until he's ready to pop off and give it to you. You could see that in a couple of fights. You could see that on the Kovalev fight. You could see that in the Plant fight. So he knows how to defend himself. But I also wonder if Canelo's physical strength would hold up against Andre Ward. Like, Andre Ward is very physically strong, and everybody gives Canelo all this credit for being physically strong, and he is. But I mean, against somebody like Andre Ward, like, I just wonder if that would exhaust him having to deal with that. But then again, I also could see Ward doing very good work on the outside. He's got a really nice long 1-2 to the head or the body, so he can be long and he can fight tall. Very versatile fighter. So I think that would be a great fight.
And if I'm not wrong, I think Andre Ward's left-handed too. So I think that's why his jab's so strong as well. But yeah, great fight. I'm just trying to think, because Ward was good against Dawson, and even when he came back, when he had the slight layoff and came back against Edwin Rodriguez, he was just phenomenal in that fight. Granted, I'm not saying Edwin Rodriguez is Canelo, but I'm just saying that was against a young guy that did have some pop.
And we got Long Live Boxing in the house. Salute to the panel. Sean, bro, I read what you had to say, but we didn't know if you were classifying it as a robbery. I know 8-4 usually swing with it not being a robbery, but since there was a knockdown, I'd like some classification from you, if you could give that to us, please. All right, man. So, hey, dude, that was one hell of a rescore. Props to Andre Ward. That was really fun, man. And I'm glad that you all chose that one as opposed to what we're going to be doing this week. We have another rescore that we're going to be visiting here pretty shortly. And I know that you guys are just all super excited about it. We're going to be taking a look at Nikolai Valuev versus Holyfield. Now, I understand this fight to be kind of a snoozer, a bit boring, but might be the most controversial and had some historical stakes. And people are saying that Evander Holyfield got robbed. So we're going to take a look at it. This would have made Holyfield a 5-time world heavyweight champion and the oldest heavyweight champion ever.
I've never seen this fight at all.
Me neither.
I've never seen it either, man. It's kind of like one of those things like, well, if Holyfield gets robbed in the middle of nowhere, and nobody pays attention, I mean, does it matter? It's kind of like a tree falling in the woods. You know what I mean? Like, I've never seen it, and I know that Sean Grigo Hicks will probably make like a more exciting trailer than like what the actual fight is going to be, because I hear it's a snoozer, but I do want to know what happened. If Holyfield was able to pull it off, man, that's something that we should all know. Like, that's kind of a big deal, if you ask me.
Yeah, definitely 2008 Holyfield.
Yeah, man.
That's
so
long past the prime.
Yeah, dude. If anybody wants to watch this along with us, this fight can be found on YouTube. But if you just want to hear what we have to say about it, we'll bring it to you al Chile, like we always do. So does anybody have any final thoughts before we sign out?
Nope.
All right. Well, hey, thank you all so much for joining us. It was great having you all there. And Long Live Boxing's chimed in here. He says that no robbery unless 9-3 or higher on the Gringo meter. All right. Well, thanks very much, man. We hope to see you next week. And for the guys on El Chile, this is the Chicano Prophet signing off.